Welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast, where the goal is to improve organizations and serve students one leader at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Jochum. If you're a department chair in higher education or any type of educational leader, and you want to improve yourself to better serve and influence those you lead, you've come to the right place. Because the best way to improve an organization is to improve its leader. Let's get started. Welcome back, friends. Today, we have what I know is an exceptional guest who will undoubtedly add value to you and those you serve. In fact, I'm bringing this to you as a two-part series so you and perhaps your team or some colleagues can listen to this, reflect on it, and then come back for the next episode. Yes, I know that primarily my topics and our guests are either higher education or K-12. Hey, this spans every area of leadership. So whether it's education, corporate, this is going to add value to you and everyone that you work with. So today's guest is Mr. Brad Black. And to say he's a phenomenal leader with a wealth of experience is an understatement. Listen to his bio here. Brad Black currently serves as president and CEO of HUMANeX Ventures, an organization that helps businesses, school districts, and athletic teams by implementing tailored processes that identify and nurture employees based on their strengths, fostering diverse yet harmoniously complementary teams, and instilling a pervasive culture of positivity within organizations. Previously, Brad served as the Vice President of Human Resources for the Stryker Corporation and also Vice President and Senior Managing Consultant for the Gallup Organization, where he was inducted into their Hall of Fame. Brad is an expert practitioner and consultant who has dedicated his career to redefining the value of human capital. His expertise has reshaped organizations worldwide, emphasizing the critical role of talent, culture, and teams in achieving excellence. His current book, which is awesome, you need to get it, is titled Talent, Culture, and Teams, The X Factors of Excellence, which Jon Gordon has called a masterclass in organizational transformation, showcasing how a focus on talent and culture can propel teams to unparalleled success. Hey, I connected with Brad in June of 2024 at the HUMANeX Ventures Community Leadership and Education Summit in Omaha, Nebraska. It was one of the most impactful leadership conferences I've been to, and they will be back in Omaha June 25th through 26th, 2025, and also in Kalamazoo, Michigan, July 29 through 30th. Like me, Brad's also a native Nebraskan. He's also a sports fan, so heads up, he's going to mention some great leaders and coaches such as Dr. Tom Osborne, Bob Devaney, Terry Pettit, John Cook, PJ Fleck, and Bill Snyder. So in part one, Brad talks about his leadership journey and impressive experience leading Fortune 500 companies with a special emphasis on developing culture, talent, and team. So enjoy part one of this masterclass with Brad Black.
Well, it started in, maybe some unusual ways when you're in teens and early 20s, where you're just, paying the bills, getting through college, trying to figure out what you're going to do for the next, many decades. And I had some, really, really rich blessings, not only, from family and leadership, an uncle that was a college president, another uncle that was a business executive. And I could always turn to them and, ask, if you're want to be in business, if you want to be in business and leadership, what would you study? And they independently said accounting. Not only the college president said that, but, the business executive who was number two in a $2 billion company. So, I grew up in a suburb of Omaha, and like this, we'll say the serious students, the ones that didn't want to party as much, they went to UNO. The party kids went to Lincoln. And so, you pay your bills, and it's like, all right, I got a job at UPS. And I was like, well, I could do better than loading boxes. I could supervise this team. So you don't know what you don't know. And I'm going to my boss going, well, what's it take to be a supervisor? Well, no, you couldn't even be considered until you've been here at least 2 years. It's like, well, who made that stupid rule? Who's your boss? I want to talk to them. So I ended up, going 3 levels above, going, what does it take to be a supervisor? And so they saw my persistence, and they're like, all right, we got an opening. We'll give you something, and you'll learn quickly. You don't know enough after being here 3 months to lead a team to do this hard work under very rigorous, high stress physical and otherwise conditions. So again, you don't know what you don't know, but it's like, all right, I go to school with these guys. It's all guys, and they're in it's a college class group in a hub of a major operation. But I wanted to do that, and so I did it and got the opportunity. And there's 5 outbound areas, and the middle one was the one I got. I didn't get the best, I didn't get the worst. I got, number 3. So I wasn't going to break anything. It wasn't an impossible job. But you could kind of see the order of, well, it's kind of like, well, there's the SEC and there's the Big Ten and there's the Big 12 and there's the, whatever. There's a rank order of the best. And it's like, well, that's historical. That I can change that. I don't know. This wasn't, permanent in the third place. And so I challenged, myself, and I said, we can do better. And within 6 weeks, we were number 1. And like this never happened. How'd you do this? Like, are you cheating? You can't cheat. I mean, somebody is counting the work hours and somebody's counting the boxes and they do the math, and you can't cheat. So it's like, well, I did it with one less person. Like I regifted the laziest guy on the team to an area that wanted a warm body, and I gave him a warm body, and the team said, thank you. We had a party on Friday after we regifted the laziest guy. And so everybody agreed it'd be better if we didn't have to do his work. Great. Well, then let's work harder. And after a while, then pride kind of just started to build up like, we're number 1. We've never been number 1. Let's do it next week. Let's do it next week. And so after a while, as many months, we were number 1. And so it's kind of like, you're lucky. We're going to give you, the second worst area. See if you can do this again. So I go to the other side of the building, and it's all a color scheme way that they name them. So I go to the yellow blue area. Same thing. It's like, oh guys, who's the lazy guy who's you're having to do the work? How about if I regift him? Would you please? Yes, I'll regift him. I'll offer him to, for no trade. Just I'll give him away to another area that will be silly enough to take him, desperate enough, and all of a sudden we beat the area that I came from. And we were written up in UPS's national magazine that we had 51 of 52 weeks at a level nobody had ever achieved in that building. So it's pieces per hour, boxes per hour. So 500 was considered to be like, wow. 600 would be considered impossible. We did 651 weeks out of 52. So that got us national attention. And so, I'm getting the attention of my boss's boss's boss, take me out for dinner. How do you do it? And I say, well, it's kind of simple. I work hard, I work smart, and I care. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What else are you doing? I go, I'm trying to explain it. It's those things. And, again, they're to the point where, that went on for, I don't know, 15, 18 months. And they give me the area that's the biggest, the worst. It'd be like, Bill Snyder taking over Kansas State back in the day. Like, you can't do it. It can't be done. All right, I know how to do it. I want to do the same thing. It's a 50% bigger area. So yes, it's harder. There's 15 guys, not 10. But I know what I'm doing. And everybody here knows I know what I'm going to do. And they can almost forecast what is going to happen when I go in, because they don't keep their secrets among their friends. That, he'll talk to the best. He'll ask them what they need. He'll listen to them. He'll support them. And one of the top needs is get rid of the lazy guy. Go regift him to the outbound area and build a team. Now, it's harder to build a team when you have kind of 3 distinct areas under one umbrella, but I didn't just have like the starting lineup. I had like, the plan B lineup and the plan C lineup and plan D lineup, because you could always have like the perfect team, but somebody's sick, somebody's, just quit, somebody's brand new. You didn't always have, like the perfect team. And so it was my chance to really kind of mess with how do I create like 5 teams? And it doesn't matter what time of the year, doesn't matter who showed up, it doesn't matter. I have five teams that can deliver results that nobody else can figure out. So I did that. And that was what I call graduate school while I'm getting my undergraduate degree, because that was leadership. I mean, I'm, having influence, the guys that were my age, to do hard physical work that wasn't fun, wasn't easy, but they're making 12.58 an hour, and I'm their supervisor. And this is a Teamster environment, a union environment, and it's kind of very hierarchical and very rigid. We used to call it the kind of the Quaker military culture of UPS, very conservative and very rigid. But I was always having the top areas and became a phenomenon. And so I was offered full-time management while I'm in school. And excuse me. And I said, well, that's pretty cool, because back in those days, this is the early 80s, Arthur Andersen, as an accounting firm, was considered to kind of be the high bar. If you could ever get a job at Arthur Andersen, you'd make 18,000. And so it's like, well, okay, well, their UPS to be a full-time manager was 28,000. So that's 10,000 more than Arthur Andersen. Wow. I mean, that's tempting. Plus I get stock options, but I could end up in Timbuktu, where they want me to be a center manager, and my career is where they tell me to go. Like, I'm not sure I wanted to sign up for that. Well, at the same time, a family friend, actually, it's like one of my mother's best friend, she was running for school board. And so her husband was out, putting out signs, and my mom says to her friend, "Hey, Brad would be happy to help." So I end up, going around town putting up signs with this lady's husband. Well, he was the personnel director. That's what they called it then, at a subsidiary of Pitney Bowes. There was a company started by Warren Buffett and John Cleary, an attorney in Omaha in the late 50s. And it just intrigued me by this culture. It was like, wow, how they talk about what they do is really intriguing. And so he said, "Would you like to go through an interview?" And I said, "Sure, I'll go through an interview." So back in those days, no online capabilities, it was a telephone interview. I went through through telephone interviews. And total over those 2 interviews was about 3 hours. And it's like, I don't know the questions you're asking. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just going to answer it. And so at the end of that, they're like, "Hey, we want you to meet some people." And so all of a sudden, they're inviting me out for lunch. And then pretty soon, they're inviting me to their Christmas party. And I could tell they're recruiting me. And so they offered me a job, and it was 18,005. So it was beat Arthur Andersen's by 500. Didn't match UPS, but it didn't matter. And there was a fork on the road in my career, like, what's going to be important for the next 30 years? How much I make today, or what I learn and how I grow? I'm choosing a path. And so actually, it was a guy at UPS, my boss's boss's boss, who took me out for dinner one time. And when I told him no about the full-time management, he said, "I'm disappointed on one level, on another level. I'm going to tell you, you made the right decision, because I've lived here my whole life and financially I'm fine. But you're unusual in that you're thinking about the 30-year decision, and that you want to keep learning and growing. And I'm going to tell you privately, you made the right decision." And so it's like, all right, great. So I go to this organization, I go through the management trainee role, which they had one person every 2 years, go through rotation at the parent company in Stanford, the corporate office in Omaha, and 18 divisions in the field from coast to coast. And so you see every function. You've got projects, assignments. I reported to a senior vice president, and it was like that was graduate school again. Like, I'm learning business, but my job is to learn the whole business, top to bottom. And the deal was, throughout that period, I could say yes to anybody who wanted to recruit me, whether it be sales position, accounting position, strategic planning, parent company, anything that I was offered, I could say yes or no. After 18 months, it's like, no, you got to decide something. Well, at the 15-month period, the VP of HR called me into his office, said, I'd like to have you be my right hand. And that's like, okay, well, it's a corporate manager role. That's a big job. Yes, you'd be responsible for corporate employee relations for our entire company, 18 divisions coast to coast. It's like, but I didn't go to school to get that degree. I don't have any experience. And he goes, but you have the talent. We know from your interviews you have the talent. And we already know that you learned a lot of this stuff real time back when you were going to school, getting the book knowledge, you're getting real life knowledge at UPS. So we know things that you don't know. And so anyway, that was about 20 years of experience packed into 5.5. And fast forward, he moves on. He wanted to live on the West Coast, want to kind of have a lifetime culture experience with his wife. And he said, we're in a Fortune 500 company, and I'm telling the president, you're my replacement, but they're seriously not going to consider you because you're not 45. You're not old enough, experienced enough for them to seriously consider. And this is a training ground for people from the parent company to come and have VP positions. So I'm going to give you the name of the recruiter that I'm working with to get my job on the West Coast because you need to interview for the number one job. You are ready for the number one job. Your resume may not say so because you're only 28, but you are ready. I watch you. I know what you know. And so anyway, then I get a call. And, all right, how about Pepsi? And so I'm interviewed with Pepsi. I'm in my second round of interviews with Pepsi. And I'm thinking, I'm just going from one Fortune 500 company to another Fortune 500 company. And it'd be a bigger job, a regional job for a bigger organization. But, I'd move to LA and be like, why did I move my family to LA to go work for a company that sells sugar water? Nothing wrong with that if you need it, but it's not changing the world because somebody buys more pop. And so same time they say, well, there's this other company in Michigan by the name of Stryker. And so my wife's a nurse, and I say Stryker, and she goes, yeah, Stryker beds. And that's like in a hospital world, you say clinics, you mean tissue. Um, and so, I knew a little bit about it, but I learned, it was started by an orthopedic surgeon in the early 40s. It was a 45-year-old company. They had 20% profit growth 5 years in a row. They had a high bar. So I go to Kalamazoo, Michigan. It's like, there really is a Kalamazoo what? Kalamazoo where? And I go there and I have my gauntlet interview on a Saturday, eight vice presidents and presidents. And, they went really well, obviously. And, they wanted to offer me the job. It's like, well, we've only had one date. I'm not ready to put the ring on my finger. I want to bring my wife back. I want to get to know the area. I want to be a little more deliberate in my discussions or my decisions because I want to think that I'm making at least a 10-year decision. This is going to have family implications. I have a 5-year-old, I have a 2-year-old, and one that's 7 months in the oven. So I want to make sure that this is a place that is going to be foundation on the foundation I've already started with. And people thought I was crazy. Why would you go to a company 1/30th the size? They just laid off 10% of the company, and they have 40% turnover in their sales force, and they have a militant union. Why would you do that? Only crazy people would do that. It's like, well, like John Bacon would say, if you fall out of bed, you can't fall any further than, be the floor. So it's like, there's only one way to go and it's up. And I know all the people they're interviewing have 10 or 15 years more experience than me, but this is the kind of place that's going to take a gamble because I speak a different language and they're going to know I speak a different language. And when I come in and I explain to John Brown about talent, he's going to realize that I know something he doesn't know. He's going to realize that I've lived in a place and been kind of, um, developed in an organization where in our parent company, we didn't go to the outside for a century to get a CEO. It was a culture of development. And when I speak that language, he's going to know that I understand development of leadership and development of talent, and he doesn't. He wants to, and he's not going to admit he doesn't, but I know he doesn't. Otherwise, there'd be all kinds of talent, and they wouldn't be laying 10% of the company off. So anyway, go into that organization, and that's really probably the most famous, well-known place that I went because I built a model that Gallup came to study, Disney came to study. We had President Bush 41 came. People were coming all the time going, how did you take this company, to two levels? Well, nobody did anything by themselves, but I did architect in a blueprint and a playbook something they'd never seen. And it was built around talent and culture. This is the foundation of transformation. There's nothing more powerful than talent. And within the culture, by design, you can make this scale with no limit, and you can do it globally. And it won't matter if we're doing this in Puerto Rico or in San Jose, California, or Kalamazoo, Michigan, with a sales force, or whether it's the manufacturing group or Cork, Ireland. It won't matter. I'll show you how. So it's like a coach can be changed at Division I, Division II, Division III. A coach can change a sport. Yeah, they coach. They know how to coach. PJ can go from the MAC to the Big Ten, and he is a coach. Wherever he goes, he will transform what he touches. A great teacher will transform a classroom. A great manager, coach will transform a team. A great leader will transform an organization. Great leaders can transform a city, a state. Again, there's great governors. There's a rank order of governors. There's a rank order of mayors. There's a rank order of everything. It's the bell-shaped curve. And if you study talent, you find out the best of every profession, they are different than the hump in the left side of the bell-shaped curve. The great teacher didn't go to a different school than the bad teacher, didn't get more degrees than the bad teacher. They're a different person. And there's 22-year-olds and go into the classroom and you've just met a future Hall of Famer who doesn't know a lot, hasn't done a lot, but they have the innate talent to be a future Hall of Famer. And that's the fun thing about discovering talent, is that you're discovering something that will be that somebody hasn't seen. You're the only one that can see below the water that this is a 2-mile deep iceberg. 2 days ago, I ran into the former athletic director at Western, and she said it was so fun to work with you during the era of PJ Fleck and ESPN Game Day coming to town and going to the college, going to the Cotton Bowl undefeated, only us in Alabama. That was the heyday. She goes, and just the discovery of PJ's talent has to be one of the best things for you. And I said, well, just wait here, Kathy. I'm going to go get a book because you're written in a book. I wrote this story in the book and your name's in the book. You were the one that was advocating, but you didn't have the authority to override the president, but you were the one that advocated that I would do the interview, and you helped change PJ's life, and he's gone on to change however many people's lives because you listened to me about let's look for talent, and we did it, and look what happened. I had the advantage of credibility in this community because of Stryker and my background, but you took the risk to say to your boss, the president, well, why don't we at least have Brad do all the interviews? Why don't we have HUMANeX do all the interviews? And then I could share with, Jon Dunn, the president at that time, Jon, there's one out of the pile of 5 who's transformational and he has the worst resume. So this is an easy decision. It's going to be hard for you to explain to your friends. So that's just a, kind of a journey to where you go to a stage and you go, and now that's being done in a community, and that's transformational. So whether it's a superintendent or a dean, or, we've been a part of selecting most of the deans at Western Michigan, most of the superintendents around this area, coaches, business leaders, presidents, every industry, if you focus on talent, and obviously the big, now 4-decade example, Stryker's worth more than General Motors and Ford put together. Stryker's worth more than 25 Whirlpools. How did they do it? Because when we started our journey, Whirlpool was worth 10 times more than Stryker. So, basically it creates value. It's created millionaires and billionaires because it's created an organization that people can't figure out. How can you be the Alabama 28 years in a row? How can you be the UCLA John Wooden 28 years in a row? Well, talent and culture. Those were the foundation pieces. The team piece came later. But when Gallup inducted me in the Hall of Fame, Don Clifton said, no, we've never seen anybody who figured out how to put the playbook together. And it wasn't just talent, it was culture, because I taught him culture. He didn't talk about culture. I talked about culture. I took my model that I built at Stryker to him after doing it for 3 years and said, Don, I want to have you involved in my work in measuring culture. I want to show you how town and culture have a synergistic relationship. You have to have both. You can't put redwood seeds in the parking lot and expect them to grow, meaning you can't put top talent in toxic environments. You got to create the right conditions to attract and to engage and inspire the right talent. They go together. No seed without seeds in parking lots don't work. It's seed in soil, water, fertilizer, and somebody will pull the weeds. That's town and culture. And so he was fascinated how I, as a practitioner, would measure culture, just like he measured talent. And then I said to him, Don, for years, SRI, which is the precursor to Gallup, you've measured talent to select it, but you haven't measured talent to develop it. As a practitioner, I don't have a choice. I've got to select and develop. I cannot, only select. I don't have a chance to, take everybody away and start all over. I got to take what I get. I got to take the opportunities out of with growth or turnover and select one more like the best, but I've got to develop the talent that's here to its maximum potential. And that was something he didn't understand. And that's something he hadn't seen. And so I created the model at Stryker and they would come and study. And then I said, I'll make a deal with you. If you work with me, I'll commit 2 years I'll send people from Stryker if you create a leadership institute where we get to focus 100% on development. And he says, deal. So I went to somebody from Marriott, somebody from Disney, somebody from Peer Later Courier. I said, hey, can we all commit if Don helps build this leadership institute that we will be the ones providing the students? And so we were all in with a 2-year agreement. So I was basically out talking to some of their clients, convincing them to join me with him to architect this. And it was phenomenal. It was rich. And so he got a chance to experience something that he hadn't experienced. And that is what happens when you pour into people that are already there. In my leadership week, I'm with the governor of Nebraska, who's later the agriculture secretary, and a president from Disney. And what a rich week. And all we're talking about is town and culture and a whole bunch of the stuff that I created at Stryker that was now in Don's hands and my hands. We could talk about what we did. And I had this home and away thing with George Kalogridis from Disney. He was at that time running HR. Later, he became president down in Orlando. And he was fascinated by what I did at Stryker. He'd come to Kalamazoo, bring a team going, we don't compete. We're not the same industry. But I'm fascinated about how you're so talent literate and you're so literate about culture and you're building the ecosystem to create this where it doesn't matter where it's done. He was fascinated by that. So we had this home and away relationship. He's a phenomenal leader, just retired. He was an intern to help open Disney World in 1871, and he just retired. So there was only 4 people that lasted that many years, but phenomenal leader. It was fun to work with people like that, but that was kind of like my dessert. I want to hang around leaders who are progressive, who want to create something that's never been created. And so again, that kind of takes me to almost today, where that journey from doing it and then teaching it, has, been where I've been since the mid 90s. And then the book came from people saying, hey, could you like codify this? Could you like write it down? Could you like tell the stories, the real life people, the real life places, the real results? And I said, yes, I will. And so, it's a labor of love. So you just, John Bacon says, it's in your head, it's in your fingers, just write. You don't need anybody to write your story. You already have one, just write it. So, he and Don Yeager, 12-time New York Times bestselling author, they were both, supporting me, giving me advice about consider this, do this, but you got the story, write it. And so both Don Yeager, Jon Gordon, and John Bacon have their fingerprints on the book, but the content is 100% coming from my life and that journey. And then the models that you continue to build and evolve, like the community model, where one of the questions from the largest shareholder, who ended up being the chairman of our company, from Stryker, he said, what would you do different now that, if you're starting your own company? And I said, well, the integrated model is what I'll always talk about. That's the fundamental. It all goes together. You can't choose selection or development. You can't choose talent or culture. It all goes together. So that's the foundation. But within the foundation, if you do this in a community, you can get synergy because the redwood trees will grow their roots together. And pretty soon people wonder, like, how is something different there? And I said, so, he knew my Stryker background. He knew what I'd done to help his smaller organizations. I said, just imagine if you have a community that speaks a common language, like talent. And so that's where Community Capitalism book was written. And we were a chapter in that book and kind of my story of Stryker and HUMANeX. And I said, you want to talk about the most sustainable and the most impactful model? It's at a community level because we live together, whether it's our parents or grandparents or our kids or our grandkids, it's personal where we live. And if we can interact with the people that are doing something different than we are in maybe a different profession or industry, but kind of doing the same thing, like they want a great hospital, they want a great school, they want a great private business, they want a great, non-for-profit. They all want great organizations, they all want great teams, but they don't know how to do it. But if we had a common place we could go and learn from each other and not feel like, your lessons are kept secret from me, but you go, you know what, if you're going to select a football coach, you should talk to Brad and HUMANeX. If you're going to select a dean, you should talk to Brad and HUMANeX. You want to select a superintendent, you should talk to Brad and HUMANeX. After a while, you do that, and people start to realize it is an ecosystem in a community where we live and together, and all of a sudden we could be successful. And we're 40 minutes from a community that just laid off 1,000 employees in a Fortune 500 company, Whirlpool. That's 40 minutes to the west, and we're 20 minutes from Kellogg that split into three parts and merged two of their companies with Mars. So they shrunk their footprint in Battle Creek, Michigan, where they were famous to be. Whirlpool shrunk their footprint in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and here's Stryker that's just growing and growing and thriving, and now again worth 25 times more than Whirlpool. And people at Whirlpool go, "How did you guys do it?" Because years ago, Whirlpool was the place. It was the Fortune 500 company. That's Stryker. Why would anybody, study a company 1/30th the size that, was a medical device manufacturer? And, that was, again, back to my early days when I came to Kalamazoo. People would always ask about Upjohn. It was the pharmaceutical company that was in Kalamazoo, and going, guys, don't confuse big and great. Great can be any size, and big can be terrible. How many organizations don't exist anymore that were once great and known? And then later, when Good to Great came out, Upjohn, as a former company, became one of the contrast companies in the research. And I said, right here, Jim Collins said, there's a company that is the contrast, meaning don't do what they did. And that's what I told you in the 80s when everybody said, well, you should do what Upjohn's doing. And I almost like, I'm going to ignore what you say because I know we are not going to follow big. We're going to follow great. That's two different things. And so we were kind of doing the Jim Collins thing before Jim Collins could write about the Blue Book and Stryker. And we were the number 2 company in his Great by Choice research. And if you would have, spent $10,000 to buy Stryker stock at the beginning of his research period, you'd have 5.3 million at the end of that 15 years. If you update that for today, you'd have over 25 million for your $10,000 investment. Well, yeah, that's what happens. You create millionaires and billionaires because you've created something of value that is not easy to do, and very few people have ever done it, and you've done it over decades. I mean, when I came in 1986 with that basic model, and then it spent a decade building it and another half decade supporting it, you go through transitions of generations. It's like, if you can do the Terry Pettit, John Cook, if you can do the Bob Devaney, Tom Osborne, well, imagine you do that 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and be like, they got it figured out. So it's that, what I call in the book, the eras of excellence. That's the high bar. Like, can you do it twice? Can you do it 3 times? Can you do it generation after generation? And that's what you have a greater chance to do in the community if you're literate about talent, about culture, and about teams. Because when you hand it off, you're not just giving it to somebody that's loyal that you like and everybody knows. You're giving it to the person who has the highest probability of success, which is what the organization and everybody deserves. And sometimes that person's internal and sometimes that person's not. But you don't have to decide on the front end where they're going to be. We have examples in education all the time where, your next rock star superintendent is the number two who's never done it, and the school board wants to talk to a search firm to go find somebody to replace their superintendent with somebody who's already done it, going, don't do it. You've got PJ Fleck right under your nose. Now I can talk about that because there's a visual example, and I will use that example. Like, if you had PJ Fleck right under your nose, would you go promote somebody who's not going to do what he does? No, then don't do it. And many times that is somebody who doesn't look like the majority. So it's a female superintendent. Like, okay, yes, she hasn't done it, but how many guys are getting jobs and they've never done it? Why don't we give the opportunity to the person with the highest probability of success? Let's just agree the greatest amount of talent is the person with the greatest probability of success. Isn't that what everybody deserves? That's what the organization deserves, your community deserves, the person in that role deserves, the people on their team deserves. Let's go with the odds. Let's be the casino, not the gambler. Let's be the house, not the gambler. The house wins most of the time. That's what you do when you convert, the process into focusing on what is empirically the most predictive factor of performance and potential. It's talent. Every time, everywhere, irregardless of profession. And that's just hard to do when people in the broad world don't do it.
Thank you for listening to part one of what is truly a masterclass in leadership, especially with respect to how we should go after talent, which builds strong cultures and teams. Hey, you can find a link to Brad's book in the show notes, and be sure to watch for part two of this invaluable conversation or masterclass with Mr. Brad Black. As always, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. If you want to learn more about my leadership philosophy and how to be an effective chair, please consider my book, The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership. You can find this and learn more about me by going to cjleadership.com. Also, please be sure to like this podcast, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. Thanks again for improving your organization and those you serve by improving yourself. Take care.